Welcome back to Giants Latest. The first week of OTAs are in the books, and there are some things to discuss. So, yesterday we talked about the offensive line. I want to talk a little bit more about that today. We're also going to talk about the wide receiver competition because outside of the starters, there's definitely some room for movement there. And then I also want to talk about what the players said during their media sessions, especially about Russell Wilson. But before we get into all that, I want to say that what I think is interesting about this year's OTAs, as I think compared to some in the past, is that there are not a ton of starting jobs that are really open. And I think that's really interesting. And I think it's good because it brings about a lot of continuity. But I also like the fact that I think it's going to push some of the younger players who are potential backups to take it that one step further and try and fight for a starting role as they should. So we'll get more into this next week where we can go through and kind of predict what the roster I think is going to look like from a starting perspective because I think it's going to be relatively easy. But what I will say is I think from a defensive perspective, more so than offense, there's going to be a lot of rotation there. Like we heard from OTAs so far that Abdul Carter has been moved all over the place. He's been lined up as an edge rusher, DL. He's been they've been having him as a quarterback spy, and then what else? I there was one of an off the ball linebacker. So I love this about Abdul Carter, his versatility. Oh, him and Chauncey Golston, I am so excited to see how they rotate those guys in and out. But I think realistically, when we look at, what the starting offensive or defensive whole is going to look like, I think we could say that it's going to be Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns on the outside, and then we're going to see Golston and Abdul Carter in the rotation. I think when it comes to those first couple snaps, it's going to be Burns and Kayvon. But I do think it's going to be very interesting to watch. And obviously, we're going to see more of that throughout the season. And I think the same thing goes for the offensive line, right? We know what the starting offensive line is going to be from left to right. It's Andrew Thomas, John Runyon Jr., John Michael Schmitz, Greg Van Roten, and then Jermaine Illuminor. Where I think there might be an opportunity for an upgrade or for a potential competition is really right guard, maybe even left guard too, because GVR is in the last year of his deal. I think they only brought him back for 1 year. And, he is more of a veteran presence and he wasn't amazing. And the Giants drafted Marcus Bowe, who also is going to have the opportunity to compete at right tackle, knowing that Jermaine Illuminor is in the last year of his deal. So I think it's going to be really interesting. And I think we could guess and predict that the offensive line is going to be just that for the starting. But I do think that there's an opportunity to say that as these young guys continue to grow and develop, that maybe there's going to be some sort of rotation there or competition as the season moves on. I also think there could be a possibility to see Evan Neal at left guard. And I know that you all are going to say we don't want to see him at left guard. And I agree with you. I don't absolutely want to see him as a starter. But I do want to know that he can be a potential backup or a rotational piece because John Runyon Jr. is not going to be here for that much longer unless they decide to extend him. And also, he's someone that is coming off an injury. I believe he had to get surgery in the offseason. So his reps were being managed. So outside of those guys that we talked about and the twos that we talked about yesterday, guys like Aaron Stinney were also in rotation here. And when Runyon was not out there, there were certain drills where they had Neal in at left guard, where they had Stinney in the rotation in the interior offensive line. Kubas and GVR were getting their rotations at right guard. And then, Stinney was getting some at left guard. So I think it's interesting how they're just focusing on the rotation. I think, it's really important that all of these offensive linemen get a lot of reps because if there's one position we know that deals with injuries, it's that offensive line, and they could use some help there. And, I think we all want to feel some sort of confidence level that if Andrew Thomas or Illuminor or any of these players go down, that you can feel like our whole season's not going to be over if Andrew Thomas goes down, right? There needs to be some sort of reassurance from everyone's sake that if Thomas goes down, there are multiple players that can step in there and hold their own. They don't have to be Andrew Thomas. They don't have to be an all-pro. They don't have to be a pro bowler. They have to hold their own so that this offense can still function instead of being abysmal and not being able to score a single touchdown in games. So that's what we need them to do and something that I hope that we will see throughout the summer. Now, I want to talk about the wide receivers because, it talks about Jalen Hyatt yesterday, and, he really doesn't have a guaranteed spot on this roster. And when you look at the starting wide receivers, I think it's pretty easy to say that Wan'Dale Robinson, Malik Neighbors, and Darius Slayton are the starting three. And outside of that, we really don't know who's going to be next in line. We know that they have Jalen Hyatt. They have Bryce Ford Wheaton. They have these undrafted free agents that they brought in. So they have Daquan Felton. They have Juice Wells, Jordan Bly. They have, these other guys that are Beau Collins that are going to have the opportunity to get in there and make plays. They also have Amir Smith-Marset, who is mostly used on special teams, but every once in a while can play in the slot and be used on the offensive side of the ball. But I really feel like that's a position that outside of the starters, there is an opportunity for players to step up and do well. And this is why, I don't want to hear it from Jalen Hyatt. You're not guaranteed anything. And, you've got big shoes to fill. If Malik Neighbors continue to have issues with this toe that apparently is lingering from college, I want to feel like if Jalen Hyatt gets in there, he's going to make some plays. Like I said with Andrew Thomas, no one expects Jalen Hyatt to be Malik Neighbors, but I expect that if he's in there and he's getting the playing time to run clean routes, make contested catches, and come down with the ball. And you have to be able to be a functional, smart wide receiver out there. And that's what I want to see from him. But what I will say is that I think that someone like Juice Wells is really going to have an amazing opportunity to make this roster. So far, he has looked good in the rookie minicamp. He also has looked good in OTAs so far. I think if he continues to learn and grow, he's going to have an opportunity to make this roster. And he's a guy that I really would love to see that from. Obviously, knowing that Jackson Dart is hopefully the future of this franchise. I think it's really nice to have a wide receiver that you have a good rapport with. And, we saw this with Daniel Jones and Darius Slayton. And obviously, they're not Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. But when you have a guy that you can build up a rapport like that quickly with and have, that type of mentality and relationship where you're on the same page, I think that's so important. And I think it's going to give confidence to both guys, too. So Juice Wells is a guy that I'm really rooting for. And I would love to see him come out of training camp and preseason looking like he can be in the rotation for the Giants and a guy that can maybe score some points. So I'm excited to see more of him, and he's a guy that I'm definitely going to be watching this summer, especially at training camp. Let's move along to some of the players who spoke to the media. So GVR and Bobby Okereke spoke, and of course, Brian Daboll spoke. And Daboll basically just did what Daboll does. So he actually gave a little bit more about injuries. And when I say a little bit more, I mean, he let it out that Malik Neighbors' turf toe, which he dealt with last year, was actually something that he dealt with in college. Now, I am very clearly not a doctor. I don't know how to fix turf toe. I don't know if it's something that could be resolved with surgery. I don't know if it's just he gets a cortisone shot and see how much pain he can play through. If anyone's a doctor and let us know in the comments. I actually am very interested because that's something now that we have to worry about with Malik Neighbors, right? We already have a team who always has to deal with injuries, and our superstar number one, one of the best players on this team by a landslide, is dealing with a lingering injury. So basically what Daboll said about the injuries as a whole is that he's really going to limit these guys now, which like I said, I think it's smart. I think it's something they should continue to do throughout training camp and preseason, especially the starters. Like Andrew Thomas, Malik Neighbors, and Dexter Lawrence do not need reps during the summer. Like those are the guys that you could throw out there at any time, and I am 100% certain that they will be just fine. So I'm glad that they're doing that, and they're kind of ramping guys up slowly. Another guy, Theo Johnson, John Runyon Jr., and then Bobby O, who said that he was dealing with a disc issue and ended up having that fixed this offseason. He did not need surgery, but, Bobby O is a guy that had an outstanding first year with the Giants, and then last year really kind of fell off, and it was really disappointing. And I think part of it was the scheme, I think part of it was the injury, I think there were some communication issues. And when Bobby talked to the media, he said that he's really excited to be back, he feels 100%. And he talked about being in year 2 of a system and how important that is, and that he feels like he's in a much better position this year to play better. So he's a guy that I really loved when the Giants signed him, and I'm a really big fan of his. So I really want him to be healthy and play well this year. And I think that, second year in the system is going to be able to help with that. And of course, having some help on the secondary, I think, is also going to be beneficial. And of course, Abdul Carter and Chauncey Golston and Roy Robertson Harris and Darius Alexander, all of those guys up front are also really going to help out Bobby O. So something else that he talked about, and GVR talked about this as well, which is why I wanted to bring it up, is they talked a lot about Russell Wilson and his leadership capabilities and what he has brought to this team since the day that he basically signed. And one thing that I really loved that they talked about was the fact that when they are in meetings, is that Russ Wilson stops the film and turns to everyone in their different position groups. He's very involved with every different position group and says, did you catch that? Did you see that there? This is what we need to be prepared for. This is what we're going to have to watch for. And I just think that that alone is something that this Giants team has not seen since Eli Manning has been here as the quarterback. I'm trying not to get too excited, but when you hear things like that, it just automatically makes me feel like our offense is in such better hands and is going to be able to run so much more efficiently when you have a quarterback who not only can verbalize and communicate all of the things that he's seeing and pointing out and explaining to the players, like, this is what we all need to be prepared for, but someone that has obviously seen it all before and is capable of being able to handle it while he's in the pocket, be able to make those quick decisions on the fly and make smart decisions and throw the ball away and not take sacks he's not supposed to take, and lead his wide receivers. I think there's so much to be excited about with Russ Wilson and with this offense. And look, he's not Tom Brady, okay? But he has a lot of good experience in this league. He won 10 Pro Bowls. He has 10 Pro Bowls. That is literally insane. So, he's got really good experience, and I think that's really important. And, when we talk about Daboll's offense, we'll get into more of this week, but Mike Kafka was calling the plays, and he did it during rookie minicamp. I think that it's going to continue on that way. I hope that Daboll has had a slice of humble pie and said, I need to focus on other things as the head coach. I know that Mike Kafka is capable of calling the plays, and he's capable of running my offense. He's done it before, and he can do it again. So we'll talk about more of this next week, but I do think that it's good, and I hope it stays that way. So stay tuned for more on Giants Latest. Hit that subscribe button.